Hello, welcome to Post Colonial Space. I'm Masood Raja, and I just recently recorded a video about my thoughts and reflections about what has just happened in Afghanistan, and that is literally the fall of Afghanistan yet again to Taliban. And it was just a reflective piece, not an analytical piece, even though I made certain claims in it. But now I want to address another side of the same issue, and this is about what's coming out of Pakistan, what I am hearing, what I am reading. And there is a certain degree of jubilation in certain Pakistani circles because they are seeing it as a vindication of what they think was their apt policy to support Taliban. So here is what is coming out. There are people who are suggesting that this is a defeat of the Western forces and Taliban have ousted the occupiers and once again proven that Afghans are unconquerable. Fine, that's a really good myth to live by. 2, some self-appointed defense analysts are suggesting that this is what Pakistan wanted all along, because Afghanistan was courting India. India was investing heavily in Afghanistan, and that Taliban are the instrument through which they have been able to balance out the strategic balance of the region. And that now they will not have a hostile Afghan government, but instead will have an Afghan government dependent on them, but also friendly towards them. That's why Pakistan supported Taliban the first time, to have a stable Afghanistan, but to also have an Afghanistan that would not be hostile to Pakistan. Now the interesting thing here to note is that for a lot of Pakistani analysts, an autonomous Afghanistan comes across as a hostile Afghanistan. An Afghanistan that tries to build its own foreign policy and its own alliances comes across as a hostile Afghanistan. So if India goes and invests billions of dollars in Afghanistan and builds schools and hospitals, that comes across to Pakistanis as a hostile act. So instead of countering that by building their schools and their hospitals in Afghanistan, which they could have done in 20 years, right? There's a blame game that goes around. There's a lot of deflection in South Asian politics. When something goes wrong in India, Mr. Modi blames Pakistan. When something goes wrong in Pakistan, it's always India's fault. And then when something goes wrong in Afghanistan, it's always Afghanistan's fault. But here is the thing to keep in mind. If you are a Pakistani, right, an analyst or an average citizen, a scholar, a teacher, there is nothing wrong in supporting one or the other regime in your neighboring countries. Most of the times it will be directed by your national interest. But when Pakistan casts its lot with Afghanistan, what is it that they are actually agreeing to? Because that will decide the perception of Pakistan in the minds of Afghans who are our neighbors and brothers and sisters. So what you are supporting is a regime that believes that all minorities are worthy of oppression, a regime that absolutely believes that women must be incarcerated in homes, they should have no active role in society, a regime that believes in public punishments and humiliation of their enemies. That's what you're supporting. And if you look at the past history of Afghanistan, this is recorded. When they captured Herat last time, all young women who were unmarried were captured too. That's in the record. Go and ask anyone in Herat. And they were married off to the conquering Taliban warriors. The ones that were more beautiful were sent back to Mullah Omar to marry. That is what Afghans did to their own people. So when you support them openly, or let's say tomorrow Pakistani government says we recognize the Taliban government, an unelected government that came to power through force, then there are consequences to that, long term. And the consequences are that if you are supporting an oppressive regime, a brutal regime, the people that they are brutalizing and oppressing obviously are not going to fall in love with you. And they, just like you blame India and India blames you, they will make you into a scapegoat, and in this case, they will have something to say about it. That is what I am talking about as a Pakistani and as someone who does public scholarship, is that it's easy to create mythologies of success and defeat. It's easy to keep saying Taliban have defeated a world power. But what's at stake for Afghan people? Do we care about them? Do we hope that their children and their women can live honorable lives, peaceful lives, without being told that they are inferior human beings simply because they are women? We made this mistake back in the 90s when we supported the Taliban as a nation. And when we did that, we became party to the oppression of the Afghan people through proxy. And the consequences of that were that majority of Afghans who were not from the Pashtun region and not affiliated with Taliban, developed a pronounced distrust of Pakistan, a sort of hatred of Pakistan. Do we want to aggravate that? So what the Pakistani government decides in the next few days, in the next few weeks, will have consequences for Pakistan, for how it is viewed by the world, but also by our neighbors, the Afghans, whose lives are in danger right now, who are not sure of their future, who might be angry, frightened. So here is what you could do, those of you who have power, right? Send in some aid. Send your doctors in. Send food. It doesn't matter who is in power. People need it. Open your borders. Let people in. You will get money for it. United Nations will fund it. Have refugee camps. Closing your border to a people conquered by a group of brutal fighters is not a recipe for being a responsible nation, for being a caring nation. So these are some of the things that I would like to say in response to a lot of people who have taken it upon themselves to try to convince everyone that this is somehow a good thing, that this is somehow good for Afghanistan, and that this is somehow good for Pakistan. These are the very Taliban who killed your school children, who bombed your cities. They will do it again. They will turn on you just like they did the last time. Keep that in mind. The strongest and the best investment in these times is to invest emotionally and materially in the welfare and betterment of Afghan people. Help them sustain this. Help them fight back. Help them have honorable, autonomous lives. This is what I would say. I'm not a defense analyst or a powerful figure. I'm a teacher. I teach. Sometimes I write. No one listens to me. No one reads me much. But I think as a human being, I would like to be on record today that these are the things you as Pakistanis ought to think about. A great tragedy has happened to the people of Afghanistan. It doesn't behoove us to celebrate because somehow we got a tactical or a strategic advantage. Another thing to keep in mind, and I'm a former soldier, the reason soldiers are not expected to make foreign policy is not because they are bad people. It's because they have a limited vision. They have a mission. We must control Afghanistan. They are not required to think beyond that. They are not required to think in terms of human cost or long-term consequences, diplomatic and others. That is the job of the politicians. That is the job of the intellectuals. Let your intellectuals speak about it. Hear them out. What are their opinions about it? What do they see as the ramifications of supporting a Taliban regime yet again in Afghanistan? Who are your Afghanistan experts? Talk to them. Hear them out. And then if the government, the civilian government, wants the military to do something, well, that's their constitutional right to ask the military to serve the country, right? Or to even serve Afghan citizens if they come as refugees. These are some of the things I think Pakistanis should keep in mind. And in all due humility, this is what I would like to say to all those, on WhatsApp and everywhere else who have suddenly started posting this tragedy as a great accomplishment for Pakistan. And if that's how you feel, then the Afghans everywhere in the world are justified in blaming Pakistan. Because if that is what you think of this, and you don't worry about the cost to Afghan lives by this shift, by this change, then all that they are saying on Twitter and elsewhere automatically comes true. So let's prove that wrong. We did this once before for the people of Afghanistan. Let's be there for them, emotionally, materially, politically, so that they get through this. And let's not side with oppressors and brutal regimes yet again to extract some kind of strategic or tactical advantage. That's all. Thank you so much. Peace and love.